for joining me today. You are on IntellectualRadio.com. I am Lynn Sharif. I'm the Wise Wife. I am so grateful that you're here. So we've got a couple things that we're going to talk about today. The first thing that I want to talk about is, how do you know as a couple that you need counseling? I have talked about counseling a number of times on the show, but what if you're there and you're not quite sure? I'm going to give you a couple things that'll give you some more information that perhaps if this is you, you should seek counseling. If you and your mate are not really talking because you don't want to fight, because every time you do talk, you get into an argument, so you just think that it's better to just not talk at all. I understand that, but that may be a clue that you need to have a neutral third party to help you work through those issues. And if you are further not talking because you think that it may lead to the marriage perhaps breaking up, and you don't really want to be alone, so you just think, I'll just live like this because I don't really want to have to deal with going back out there and trying to find somebody. Because I firmly believe that you should do what you can to salvage, if you have even a shred of love for each other, to salvage it, save it. So again, if you're not talking because you don't want to fight, you don't want to do anything to rock the boat because you don't want to be alone. Furthermore, if you are withholding affection from your spouse, if you are a woman who's like, I'm not having sex, I'm not doing that. If you're withholding affection for any reason, that is a sign that you should seek counseling. And if you have just joined us, I'm giving these top reasons, if you are here as a couple, that you need to seek counseling. If you find that you are really hurt over little things. Now, I'm not saying if it's something that hurts you and your spouse is like, really? I'm not saying that. I'm talking about being hypersensitive. So things that wouldn't normally bother you, you're just hypersensitive. That means that you might be covering up something else that's much deeper, and you need to work out that something deeper with the help of a counselor. We've talked about this in past weeks. If you are in the silent treatment, like y'all just not talking at all, that is a sign that there is a whole lot going on. And I've often said that you can't keep sweeping stuff under the rug, because if you do, eventually you're going to trip over that big old thing that's in the middle of the floor. But maybe you all have gotten to the point of silence. That's a clue. Maybe you're in a place, and this is something that only you can talk about. Maybe the secrets are piling up. Maybe you have a whole lot of secrets. It could be financial secrets. I spend a whole lot of money that my spouse doesn't know about. It could certainly even be secrets about emotional infidelity, the hole on the other side, for real infidelity. It could be all those. If you have not decided to end your marriage, I would love for you to fight for it. Fight for it. So if one of you maybe has made a mistake in the marriage and the other person has not forgiven you, unforgiveness is a major sign that we have some things to work out. And then the other thing are what I call circular arguments. You know the ones. It doesn't really matter the subject. It could be about money. It could be about raising the kids. It could be about sex. But you can almost predict exactly what your spouse is going to say. I'm going to say this. They're going to say that. Then I'm going to say this. So circular arguments. You guys are saying the same thing over and over again, and you never move on. That is a sign that you may need to get into counseling. So if you're just joining us, I just went through a number of reasons that if you as a couple are here, this is a time that you may need to seek counseling. Counseling has made such a huge difference in my own marriage. Being married 23 years, we certainly did have some bumpy ones. And I even covered, a few weeks ago, I covered one of the books that was so very helpful to us. But it also was about sitting down and working things out. And it wasn't sitting down with the counselor to say, please tell my spouse why they're wrong and I'm right. It's not that. It's how can we start working through some of these issues that we have been dealing with. And so the bottom line is that if you just find that you're unable to navigate the challenges with the two of you, it's time to get a neutral third party at that table. It could be a spiritual advisor, a pastor, it could be an actual counselor. But I also think another area that is so very helpful is having an accountability couple. An accountability couple, somebody else who is in this boat with you. They really are. You just need somebody to talk to, somebody to say, okay, am I wrong? Am I crazy? Accountability couples can really be helpful. And it's not, I found that it can't necessarily be like your best friend or his best friend, because those folks are not neutral. They love you and they may not be neutral enough to be your accountability couple, but look for someone, mark someone in your circle, or just that you know, maybe socially or at church, that you can actually talk to about being an accountability couple for you. One of the other issues, which brings me to my other subject, my husband and I, 23 years, married to Chef Sharif, one of the issues that we went to counseling about was about having a blended family. Because if you don't know, this is our second and last marriage, and each of us came to our marriage with children. And blended families can be a treacherous road to walk. If you have kids and you're trying to put it together, you guys love each other and you expect that everybody's going to love each other. And that is not necessarily the case. So I normally call folks that come on the show regularly friends of the show, but my friend of the show tonight is not my friend. He's my lover. He is my husband. So I have Chef Sharif on here because we want to just jump into blended families. But please know that this is the first time I've talked about it, but it's not going to be the last time, because this subject is so very complex. It's complicated and there's so many different things. But if you are listening to us tonight and you do have something that you want to ask, or maybe even something that you would like to add to the conversation, I'd love to have you call me. The number to call is 708-223-8953. Again, 708-223-8953. If you are a blended family, if you have a question about blended families, or even a testimony about your own blended family, I would love to hear from you. So again, 708-223-8953. So I want to introduce Chef Sharif. So glad to have you, Chef.
Good evening. How are you?
Doing well. So we've talked about blended families in the past. And here's the thing, folks. The same issues that you have in your marriage, say this is your original marriage, all of those things, how do you resolve conflict? How do you handle the finances? How do you handle any of the marital challenges? All of those things are exacerbated when you have a blended family. And so many times blended families do fall prey to divorce because they are blindsided by this pressure, because you think, oh my goodness, we love each other and everything is going to work out. So Chef, I do want to ask you, as we went into this blended family, tell me some of the thoughts that you had going into a marriage with a woman with children.
Well, actually, for me, that was something I was looking for, being that I'd had children myself. I wanted someone that also had children, because the love and involvement that a parent has for a child is different and separate that the love you have for a spouse. And I didn't want there to be any jealousy, so to speak, because I was still am close with my children, very active in their lives, for a period, raised them as a single parent. So I needed someone that understood all of that.
Did you ever date a woman without children?
I did, and that's what what caused me to come up with that. I hate to make it like a checklist, but that was one of the criteria because, as I said, I date women that didn't have children. They oftentimes didn't understand the level of involvement and participation that I had in the lives of my children.
Mm. That's really that's great. I don't know that I thought about it. I think though, as you get older, it is very difficult to find someone who does not have children. And we were in our 30s and 40s when we met and married. So, again, we both had children. The difference is that you and your spouse, your ex-spouse, had been divorced for a long time before we started dating.
Correct.
And I was not. I was not very far out of my divorce. And one of the challenges of having a blended family could be around ex-spouses being challenging. And I can definitely say that it was more of a challenge on my end than it was on your end. Is it fair to say that you and your ex-wife had gotten to a much better place from when you guys had the divorce?
Yes, I mean, we went through our trials and our tribulations and our quote unquote bad times, but by the time you and I had met, the majority of that had been resolved. Neither one of us used the children as pawns against each other. That's one thing I was always thankful for. We were able to separate our marital responsibilities from our parental responsibilities.
Yes, that was definitely. Thankfully, we didn't have double challenges. But a lot of times when people are divorced and then they remarry, they naively assume that their first marriage taught them everything they needed to know about how to have a happy remarriage. And likewise, people who are divorced with children believe that by nature of the fact that they're a parent, that it teaches them how to be a step parent. And neither of those things is the case. Neither of those things is the case. Just because you've been married before doesn't mean that this is going to work out. And just because you're a mom or dad to your biological children, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a great step parent. I'm curious. Well, when I talk about remarriage, were there any red flag issues that you wanted to be really, really careful about as you entered into remarriage?
For me, it as I said, it was dating someone that had children. Excuse me. Dating someone that had children so they could understand.
Mm-hmm.
And coming in as a step parent, being accepted by Jordan, my non-biological son, which I consider, my son, and just having a relationship that was separate from the relationship of you and I, but having a direct relationship with him.
Yeah, I think that's certainly very important. But, when you start dealing with children from stepchildren, and while we did not call our children stepchildren, the reality and for purposes of identification, I think it's very important for us to use that. But again, just because you as a couple are in love doesn't mean the children are going to follow close behind. They could come into one of three different camps. They could completely welcome the union. They could slowly adjust over time, or they could resist. So you might have one of three. And if you are just joining us, we are talking about blended families. I have husband of the show, Chef Sharif, on because we are talking about our blended family. We have been married for 23 years. Our children are now grown, but at one time they were all in the house. But if you have any story of your blended family, the trials, the tribulations, please don't hesitate to call at 708-223-8953. So Chef Sharif was just saying that it was important for him to establish a relationship separate from me with my son. And I think one of the things that made it a little bit easier, I was divorced and my son was 5 when we got married. So he was really, really young. He was very young. And it may have made it a bit easier to establish a relationship. But the one thing that happened with my marriage is that, well, my husband actually, not like you're not sitting here, but he actually wrote vows to my son at our wedding. And the one thing he pledged is that he did not want to replace my son's father because he was there present in the picture. And so he's like, I do not, and you can speak a little more on that, but he never sought to replace. None of this call me daddy, none of that. But if you want to speak on that, please feel free to.
Well, again, that was part of establishing the one-on-one relationship with Jordan directly without going through you, so to speak. Having him understand that I saw my role as a positive male figure for him, a support system. But again, he had a father that was alive and well and involved in his life. And my role and or objective is not to replace him, but to just be there as a support.
Thank you for that. When you actually look at the issues of blended families, and there are a lot of them. And again, like I said, this is not the last time that we're going to discuss blended families. But one of the things that people they do call these types of families where you married with children, we call them blended. We like to call them crockpot because with a crockpot, it's not a microwave. It's not instant, but you put the ingredients in there and it has to evolve over time. And it's not going to be an instant thing. And so I certainly want you to reset your expectations and understand that this is a work in progress. And so we can certainly discuss some of the potential issues. And the one that's really at the top of the list is, what is your children's response to your divorce? What is the children's response to the divorce? Because a lot of times children really, they want to see their parents together, and having a new spouse, if your child was really hurt around the divorce, that may not be the easiest transition for them. So I want you to keep that in your mind and understand that your child's response to that separation and divorce of their nuclear family, it may greatly impact how well this family, your new family, is going to do. When it comes to discipline, that's another issue. And so if you could describe for me, Chef, what your approach on discipline was in this blended family, that will be helpful.
That was challenging to a degree because I'm old school. I believe in corporal punishment, so to speak, but I had personal issues with that for Jordan because he wasn't my biological child. His father was still alive, and I would always, put myself in the place. How would I feel if another man used corporal punishment against one of my children? Not too happy. So I deferred from corporal punishment because of that.
So yes, spanking was not something that was going to work. We made an agreement, because here's the other thing. Remember, I talked about counseling prior to talking about blended families. We actually did go to counseling specifically. This is before we were married, to actually talk about how this blended family was going to look. And we did make an agreement that there would not be corporal punishment. He would not be spanking my son. And likewise, the kids, and it's so funny calling them the kids now. They're so grown. They are really grown right now and off on their own. We even have our first grandchild, but both of their parents were in their life, and we did not live far away from their mom. So I used to always tell them that I'm like Switzerland. I am not creating rules. I am merely being, like Chef said, I'm being a trusted advisor, but I am not making any rules. Not at all. You go to your parents for that. But at the same time, certainly the kids had to be respectful, and they were, but I was not instituting any punishment. That was really, really important because that's something that's really very, it's touchy. It's very touchy. And likewise, when you have children that are having to go between households, that's a challenge. As a divorced person, one of the things, I said this in my first show, when you are considering divorce and you have children, are you going to be prepared for the fact that you're spending half your time with your children? And guess what? You don't have a say-so. There are a whole lot of people who try to have a say-so, but I'm telling you that there's probably major chaos going on when you are trying to dictate what happens in another person's house. That is so, so tough. It is really tough. And trust me, I lived through the toughest of that, dealing with two households and trying to have an impact, kids coming back and having to deal with different rules. All of this is not easy. It's not easy. And it takes a while to move into this crockpot thing. So I don't want you to think it's going to be instant. Not at all. But parenting plans and actually talking about it, talking about the parenting plan, talking about how you're going to handle conflict. If something comes up, who is going to handle it? Who is going to say something? And that is so, so very important. And that's also really important when it comes to dealing with your ex-spouse. Having the chaos of a volatile ex-spouse relationship, it adds to the pain. It definitely adds to the pain. So what I would also say is just having effective parenting strategies and working on that. How are you going to address misbehavior? How are you going to set boundaries, limits, all of those things? But at the same time, how do you provide a nurturing home environment in spite of all of that, or in addition to all of that? So we certainly had, all of these things. Co-parenting did happen. And I would say that there were only 2 occasions where it really got to be challenging. One was when my son was a teenager. And I can certainly turn the floor over to you. You can give a brief explanation of what happened in that scenario. The one time that, now, like we said before, no corporal punishment, there was no spanking, but there was one particular scenario that we had to deal with, and I can let you share that.
Excuse me, this was Jordan, teenage years, being rebellious, the eye rolling, the lip sucking, the talking back, and this was directed towards his mother, not me. And so had more than several conversations with him around that, and pretty much had to draw the line and tell him that's just not allowed in the house. If you do it, there'll be consequences. Of course, he moved forward, repeated the action, and for me, again, not looking at corporal punishment, but I did take my finger and flick him, to which he jumped up and, to use the term, I'll say he tried to buck, but that was quickly squashed, and then Lynn, his mother, intervened.
So what Chef was just describing, if you've just joined us, we're talking about blended families and how to handle conflict as well as discipline. So the one time that, because we already agreed that there would be no corporal punishment, he did not spank my son. I did not spank his children. But once, when Jordan was a teenager, he did rise up and he did try the whole, "You're not my daddy." And I just being in the moment, because I'm watching this whole thing play out in slow motion, what I saw was that he was reacting, the child was reacting, Jordan was reacting more to being corrected. He was being corrected because he had on many, many occasions had sucked his teeth at me. And so if that could be on a graveside, on a gravestone, sucking your teeth is a form of disrespect. And so once things calmed down, I did go and talk to him. And the reality is that he had had many, over 10 years of, because at this point, he wasn't even 15. So we had been married for a very long time. And there had never been a scenario where it was, where he deserved, where Chef deserved the "you're not my daddy" thing. And so after that scenario, I talked to Jordan and I asked that he apologize, because he really was in the wrong. And it was not, it was just a knee-jerk reaction. On the other side, there was there was a time when I read something that his daughter wrote, and she was in high school, but she was mortified when she found out that I'd read it. And so there was no need to have a huge intervention. But again, I had to have him handle it. Again, he was going to be the person. So again, when you're dealing with the discipline, and please, if you have anything, you can certainly drop it in the mic. I'm sorry, drop it in Instagram or Facebook. I actually do see a question here. Speaking on parents of the children accepting new mates, I certainly will get to that. But talking about discipline, how you're going to handle it, drawing boundaries, and talking about how you're going to deal with the ex-spouse. And in terms of acceptance, the way I describe the acceptance is really around, it's really more that Crockpot. I said, when you have children and there is a new person introduced, there's going to be one of three reactions that your children are going to have. They're either going to welcome this union, they're going to slowly adjust to it over time, meaning every day we have to be very intentional about how we handle that, or they're going to outright resist it. And if you're in the land of outright resistance, that would be something else I'd add to what I talked about at the beginning of the show, is how do you know you need counseling? And if you have children that are outright resistant to it, you are going to have to bring in a neutral third party, because just because you're in love doesn't mean that it's going to happen naturally for the children. So I definitely want to just give you a couple of parting comments with regards to handling blended families. One is that watch the words that are coming out of your mouth. Your words should be uniting versus dividing. It doesn't mean, I'm speaking of what you say to your children or what you say to the children. Certainly when you're talking to your spouse, you guys have to talk about things in the manner that they're happening. So you have to be real about those things, but make sure that when you come out of the bedroom, that your words, both you and your spouse's words, are uniting this family and not dividing it. I'm also asking that you be fiercely loyal to each other. So for an example, your husband or wife shouldn't cancel plans with you if the ex suddenly needs something. That's challenging. That's definitely challenging. So I want you all to be fiercely loyal to each other. And you also have to remember that your spouse gets first say. You cannot make agreements with your ex-spouse without running it by your spouse. So I want you all to be fiercely loyal in your words. I want you to be fiercely loyal in your actions. And I also will drop some, in the comments, I definitely will drop some resources for you if you are in blended families that can be helpful to you. Is there anything, Chef, that you can say in closing about your blended family experience, and perhaps anything that you could offer someone who's listening? Maybe they're about to get married, or maybe they are in the middle of a blended family situation and they're struggling.
Just know that it's a continual work in progress. It's a journey. It's never, you get to the point, as with any relationship, that okay, we've arrived and we don't have anything else to do. We as individuals are always changing, evolving. That includes ourselves, our children, our spouses. So just being aware of those changes, learning to grow with those changes, and just being able to adapt to those changes. As we talked earlier, we raise children from young children through teenage years to now young adults and adults. And each stage is different. There's development. There's a learning curve for each each area for both the children as well as the parent. So I would just say keep an open mind. Um, as Lynn says, seek counseling, seek advice. Know that you're not the only one that has gone through this and will go through it. So seek like-minded and like experienced couples that can be an asset to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And if you have any stories that you'd like to share, please email me at lynn@lynnsharif.com. If you have questions about your blended family, any comments, please email me at lynn@lynnsharif.com. I am also going to put some other resources in the comments after the Facebook and Instagram has ended for today for you to use as resources. So I definitely appreciate it. Also advertise. I'm certainly going to be accepting advertisers, so please email me at lynn@lynnsharif.com if you are interested in advertising on the Wise Wife radio show. And also want to thank you for joining us tonight. You are on IntellectualRadio.com. I also go live on Instagram and Facebook each week. So I really look forward to you joining me on next week at 7 p.m., same time, IntellectualRadio.com, Instagram, and Facebook. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much. Have a good night.